I did not expect to like that sort of spectacular failure. Like it was, that's what I considered it. I didn't just like fail. It was like I failed spectacularly. Like I was blindsided by that. I did not I really thought this is a matter of effort. If I put in the effort, it'll work. At least on a modest level, I'll be able to do what I wanted to do. And this actually, the results that I got proved me wrong. Like, no, you can give it everything that you have, everything. And you can, including just, blood, sweat, and tears, effort, everything. And it does not guarantee any success at all.
Welcome to Be Human, Eric.
Thank you, Jennah-louise. It's an honor to be here.
I'm really excited for this one, Eric. Eric, you and I kind of met each other online. You came across my podcast, I believe, and I was very fortunate enough to go on your podcast. And since then, I think we've talked for many hours. So I'm excited to kind of see where we go on this one. Keep it nice and casual and exploratory. So where I want to start, Eric, is, to my understanding, your 20s was a difficult time for you, around your mid-20s. Can you share more about that time in your life?
Absolutely. I think that our 20s is such a pivotal time of life, and it often gets kind of ignored. For instance, there's all these coming of age stories, but those are usually about teenagers, but I really feel like the 20s is the decade of your life that is, they're all important, but the 20s is really when you have to figure out who you are, or you're trying to figure out who you are in the world and what you want to do with yourself. And there's pressure coming from every direction. There's expectations from your parents, from society, from your teachers, whatever, culture you came from. And in your 20s, you can start to call some of the shots, hopefully, increasingly so. And you get to kind of decide what you want to keep from your upbringing and what you want to maybe, explore in a different direction. But I think it's also certainly for me, it was a very tumultuous time. And
what do you mean by tumultuous?
Meaning, emotional highs and lows, and also really trying to figure out, kind of, as I was saying, who I was and wanted to be, because I had a very clear idea of that going into my 20s. And by the end of it, that was totally upended. And, it was like, I have no idea, So yeah, my story is a little different, I guess, in that I knew a lot of people growing up who they had no idea what they wanted to do with themselves, and they didn't know what they wanted to major in, and they didn't know what career they were interested in. That, I think, is maybe the more common experience. But I was a little unusual in that I knew exactly what I wanted to do from, I would say, the time I was a teenager, which was music. Music was my passion, and I was sort of, had a single-minded focus on it, an obsession with it. And when I say music, that's a big word, and that can encompass a lot of things. So specifically, I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. I was started learning guitar when I was 13. And by the time I actually got my hands on a guitar, I had been clamoring for one for years, and finally got one. And a lot of kids, like, they're forced to take music lessons, but for me, it was like I was begging for lessons, and I would pay for them myself. I had a job working actually at a record store back when they were still around. And that was like the ideal job for me. And I would take 2 buses back and forth each way to my guitar teacher's house and pay for the lessons myself. That's how badly I wanted to learn. This is before YouTube. I couldn't just go on YouTube and learn things like and so, I was obsessed with music and learning guitar, and pretty soon into it was interested in writing my own songs. So I certainly learned lots of favorite songs of mine of other artists, but I really wanted to do, my own songwriting. And I kind of thought, this is my thing. And I really, when I thought about it, it was the perfect job for me being a singer-songwriter. Here's why. I have these two aspects of my personality, right? Like I'm the most outgoing introvert you ever met, or I'm the most introspective extrovert. I'm not sure which it is, but I'm both. And I have these two sides of myself. I think in order to be a good writer, you have to be an observer. You have to be a really good observer. And you also have to be somewhat solitary, because writing ultimately comes down to spending time alone in a room working on whatever it is you're writing. So I had that, I was always pretty comfortable with spending time alone and, thinking about things. But I also loved being on stage. It's weird. I mean, like two completely kind of different facets of my personality. I absolutely loved it. I felt totally at home, whether it was just performing in a room for friends or, just any kind of situation. Um, so I felt like this is the perfect job because it satisfies both of those very disparate aspects of my personality. And plus I loved music. I loved what I was doing. So, and, at some point, as a teenager, I started getting like, I didn't think I was that good yet. Like, I mean, I was like, I wanted to be good, and I practiced and practiced, but I didn't think I'm like, yeah, but I would play for peers, and they would be really impressed, and I realized, oh, this is actually like, this can help me socially. Like this actually, like, people, like this. And I didn't do it initially for that reason.
Mm.
I did it because I loved it and I just wanted, to do it. And then I realized, wow, like there's some potentially good payoffs to doing this and rewards to doing this. So it just made it that much more, as I got older, and it just became more clear, like, this is exactly what I want to do. So I went to college, and kind of because it was expected, I always did well in school, and it was just a given from the time I was a kid. Of course, you'll go to college. College, I wasn't really happy in college, and I ended up having a self-designed major because I didn't want to. I was interested in lots of things, but not enough to major in any of them. And all I wanted to do was music. I wanted to major in writing songs and playing them, and you couldn't do that. Uh, there is a school called Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I found their catalog. And when I looked through it, it would be like a kid looking at like a catalog for Disneyland. I was like, I don't believe this. You can take a class called the Music of John Lennon. Like, that's a
Wow.
class that
Yeah, it's cool.
You can major in songwriting. Like, that's a major. You could also major in film scoring, which wasn't what I wanted to do, but I was just like that's how seriously they take music there, and not just classical music. Because the problem with most music programs at universities was, if you weren't a classically trained musician, then that's the only thing that mattered typically. And I knew how to read music, but I didn't sight read, and I didn't play an orchestral instrument in the usual sense. So, it was sort of like, because I remember I did investigate, I explored potentially music as a major, and it wasn't going to happen where I went to school. I applied to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and didn't get in. There was no demo, there was no audition. It was just all based on my application. And I was pretty crushed, initially. I was like, man, because it seemed like the only way I could satisfy my parents by getting a college degree and also, pursue my passion at the same time. But I soon kind of put together that all of my musical heroes, none of them, if they bothered going to college at all, they didn't go to college for music and songwriting. They dropped out of college so they could focus on their music and songwriting,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, if they even went to college. So that was some consolation to me. I ended up almost like unintentionally getting my college degree and graduating by default. And I say that because at least once a semester, I would have a crisis where I would be like, that's it, I'm done, I'm leaving, I'm going to get on a Greyhound bus tomorrow to San Francisco, I'm out of here, I'm not doing this anymore. And each semester it was something different that made me go, okay, I'll go back, like. But a pivotal experience was in between my junior and senior years of college, when I decided to spend a summer in Nashville. I chose Nashville because it was one of the three big music business hubs in the United States, the other two being New York and LA. And Nashville just seemed a lot more accessible to me, a lot more doable. I read about it. I read this book called The Musicians and Songwriters Guide to Nashville, and it talked all about how there were writers' nights that you could play at all over town, and you could network with other musicians. And it just seemed like, oh, I could do this. So I actually, like, this is before the internet. I contacted student newspapers at colleges in Nashville, and I found a grad student who had an extra bedroom that he was trying to sublet for the summer in his apartment. And I didn't actually meet him until I arrived in Nashville. I took a bus down to Nashville, and he picked me up at the bus station. And I spent the summer there, and I did exactly that. I played, I worked a job. I waited tables during the day to bring in some money, and I lived unbelievably frugally. And then every night I would be out, going to writers' nights, listening to other songwriters, performing at every chance that I got, and meeting some people that became lifelong friends actually that summer, who I was simpatico with. And I still had one more year of college when the summer was up, and I'm like, oh, like I guess I got to go back and finish this.
Yeah.
And I did, but shortly after, one of the friends that I had made in Nashville that summer said, hey, my brother moved out. I have an extra room in the apartment. It's yours if you want it. And boom, I moved back, and then spent, 3 years, like really, really, really going full throttle in the direction of music and songwriting and music making, and trying to get a career off the ground. And it was one of the most amazing times of my life. I mean, easily. And I grew exponentially. College was like a holding ground. It was almost like you're living away from home, but not really. I mean, you got your meals made for you, and like they clean up your bathroom in the dorm, and like, it's a coddled kind of existence. And I didn't really have a purpose, I felt, for being there, other than at every opportunity I would walk around with my guitar, like floor to floor in the dorm, if I had written a new song, and I would play it, and
Wow.
like, and do like impromptu concerts. And so I kind of projected singing and songwriting onto my major, as it were, in college. I spent as much time as I could doing that. But it wasn't until I moved to Nashville that, because I was in Nashville, I was surrounded by everyone there is basically doing the same thing. Like they want to make it in music. And so, I mean, everyone, like, an exterminator comes, like, he's a songwriter. I mean, everyone in Nashville. So it was incredible because, I got to see people at every level, like from the beginners of the beginners, that really you sort of question, do they even have any business getting up on stage? Like, they're so, inexperienced, let's say. From that level all the way on up to like the top pros in the world. And any night of the week you can go out and hear music in Nashville, really any genre. People associate Nashville with country music, and that's where the heart of the music business, it revolves around that in Nashville. But it really attracts musicians of all stripes and all genres. And so it was an incredible immersion experience of absorbing music and being around songwriters and getting and practicing my craft and getting better at it, writing and recording and performing. And I know this is an incredibly long answer to your question, but I feel like that context was necessary before, like, things took a turn, I guess you could say. But I basically was so driven and passionate about this. I was like so determined, like, I am going to do this. Did I want to be rich and famous? Well, sure. Absolutely I did. But that I didn't like, my goal was like, I just want to be able to do this for a living. Like I just, even if it means like eking out a living, just scraping by, like that's fine. Like if I get to do what I love and I'm writing my own music and performing and recording it, then like I'm happy. Like that's the dream. That's what I want. Anything more than that, great. That would be wonderful. But I thought I can do this if it's just a matter of effort. If it's just a matter of effort and not giving up, then I'm in. I'm going to do it. Like it's that I was that confident. I mean, I guess you could say confident. I was plenty insecure in all kinds of other ways because I was in my 20s. And
That's just what you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot to be insecure about. You don't have much real life experience. In my case, my only experience was school. I mean, it's part of, I don't know, it's part of the ambivalence I have about higher education, which is people like when you're 18 years old and it's time to go to university or college, all you've ever known about life is school. So how can you're not really prepared to take full advantage of what a university has to offer. Plus, you want to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, like, you don't care about I mean, it's not that I don't think it's the best time. I mean, I believe education is a lifetime, your pursuit. But I feel like it's certainly in my case, I did not make the most of my time in college and all the resources that were available to me because I was 18.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, so my Nashville experience was really, I felt my first time like living on my own for real, fending for myself and learning how to be a person, not just a musician. I grew enormously as a musician in that time.
I want to know, Eric, when did things begin to take a turn for you? Because sort of up until now, as you're saying, you kind of had this gift that a lot of us don't have of clarity of knowing who you are and what you want to do. Why did things change for you?
So it was very unexpected. I was very, very driven. And part of that ambition, built into that ambition that I had, was impatience. And I think that characteristic, that trait, in some ways it served me well because I wasn't going to just wait around for things to happen. I felt like I will make them happen. And so I was perfectly willing, for instance, to have a record, back in the 90s, in the old days, the world was totally different. This is pre-internet. I mean, the internet existed, but it was not used, it was not really widely used yet. Email was like new. And so the way that the music business, operated back then was the coveted thing for a musician was to get a record deal, was to get signed to a recording contract with a record label. And that was like the ticket to, unlimited possibilities. And it was still like that in the 90s. But you know what? There was this singer-songwriter who's still around doing amazing things named Ani DeFranco. I don't know if you're familiar with her. And she was a peer. She was just a little bit older than I, but she was basically my age. And I saw her perform at the Philadelphia Folk Festival in the summer of 1994 and was blown away. Anyway, the reason I mentioned Ani DeFranco is that she was an incredible inspiration, not just artistically, but she had she, as fiercely independent as she was as an artist, she was that way about her career. And most musicians were like, please, music business, please, record company, pay attention to me, please sign me. And she was like, giving them all the finger, like, I'm not interested in you. I don't want to be a part of your corporate bullshit. And she's like, she was doing her own thing. And she started her own record label called Righteous Babe Records. And it started off almost as a joke because she was selling tapes out of the trunk of her car when she would drive across the country playing gigs. But it became a real record label and she signed other artists. And she managed to actually like crack the Billboard charts on her own label. Like she got to the point where and this was right when I was like, really pursuing this seriously. she was at the point in her career where the record companies were all wooing her. They were pursuing her. That's the opposite of every other musician's experience. The musician is like out there trying to get their attention. They all are like trying to, and she was basically like, I'm not interested. I don't want to compromise what I'm doing. And if I sign with you guys, then I'm basically selling my soul to the devil. I want to do my music the way I want to do it. No restrictions, and she's like, I don't need you. I don't need you. And she even wrote a song called The Million You Never Made, which was directed at the record label saying, I'm going to be, or I could be the million you never made. Ha 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 ha.
Very
So
cool.
she was immensely inspiring. And the reason I went on that detour was because I took a great deal of inspiration from her. And I thought, wow, I didn't necessarily think I could duplicate or replicate her success. I really was very doubtful of that. But I thought, wow, I can make my own album on my own label and I don't have to wait for a record company. And that's where that, I was so impatient. Sure, I had made a demo and submitted it to 75 different record companies and was turned down by all of them, which is like, that's paying your dues. Like that was like, yep, step one, that's get rejected by every record company. The Beatles were rejected by every record. So, so I managed to record an album on my own somehow. Like, I scrapped together like amazing musicians I had met all over town to play on it, and found a guy who was creatively simpatico with me, and I recorded it in his own home studio. And he was an incredible help in just getting the recording made, and he played on it as well. And for a really modest amount of money, it was about $5,000. I made an album. I mean, like a studio quality album. And I was really damn proud of it. And the coolest thing was I had total creative control. I had no, music executive saying, no, this song's too long. You can't do this. You can't do like, no, it was like, I did it exactly the way I wanted. So that was thrilling. It was really like a dream come true. And I still, though, I would have been more than happy to have a booking agent or a manager or even a record company swoop in and say, hey, you already made your album. Let's go. Let's do something with it. Let's make millions of dollars, whatever. Not that was my singular ambition, but anyway, I decided I started my own record label, and I just kept taking it out of impatience. I kept taking it upon myself to do more and more. So not only did I, make the album myself, but then I became a one-man record company. I started my own label. And like, I didn't know anything at all about business, but I got like a business bank account and a toll-free phone number and a PO box, and started creating my own marketing materials. And I became my own manager, and I did everything. I had to eventually quit my day job and devoted myself full time to this. I was so determined. And I know this is a long answer to your question, but the real turning point was I did all these long shots. I sent it to everyone that I thought might, potentially be interested in it, or, be able to help my career. Or you get one champion who has clout in the business, and, off you go. But I wasn't counting on any of that. I thought I have to make this work in a realistic way. And so I decided I was going to book my own college tour. I was going to play, because I had always done really well playing music for, whether it was college students when I was in college. College audiences were perfect for me because I could just keep their attention with just myself and a guitar. I didn't need a band. And they were educated and they would listen, as opposed to as opposed to doing the bar scene. And there was a bar scene where I went to college, but my music was meant to be, it was more acoustic and meant to be listened to, not shouted over and or danced to or whatnot. So it was a listening experience. And I had really done well, and I thought this is my key. So I, not knowing anything about anything, I just started calling randomly I bought this directory of colleges and started calling them all over the country, hundreds of them, pitching myself. And I spent months doing this and went into debt. And, again, this is pre-internet. So everything was physical products, physical discs that had to be manufactured, physical packages that were sent in the mail, and you had to pay postage for each one of them. And Also, before, I know I sound old here, but like this is before cell phones, really. So we had landlines, and to make a long distance call cost a lot of money. You didn't just pay a monthly fee and then you can call anywhere in the country you want. Um, the first month's phone bill that came back when I was making these calls was $600. And this is like back in 1997. It was a lot of money. So I'm going into debt doing this, but I thought it's worth it. It's worth it. Like it's whatever it takes, you know?
Right.
And I ended up sending packages to 182 different colleges. I remember that number very well. And I followed up with each and every one of them myself. And the short version is that and I thought if I get 20 to 40 bookings somewhere in that vicinity, then it'll pay for itself. I'll be making the same amount of money I made at my stupid day job. It wasn't stupid, but it was not what I wanted to do. And to me, that would be like a success if I could, and then just be on the road for the entire, this would have been fall semester of 1997, just literally drive to a college, play a gig, do a show, sell CDs, get people to sign your actual physical paper mailing list and just spend the whole semester doing that. And that was like my dream. And I thought I'm going to make this happen. And in the end, out of 182 schools, I ended up getting one gig,
Wow.
one booking. A lot of them like fell apart at the last minute or whatever. Like there were deals and like they didn't, they fell through and I did not expect to like that sort of spectacular failure. Like it was, that's what I considered it. I didn't just like fail. It was like I failed spectacularly. Like that's an unbelievably small percentage. And these were the colleges that like, this wasn't even all the ones that I called. It was just the subset of colleges that said, go ahead and send us your stuff, and then I followed up relentlessly. And so what happened was I was blindsided by that. I did not I really thought this is a matter of effort. If I put in the effort, it'll work at least
Right.
on a modest level. I'll be able to do what I wanted to do. And this actually, the results that I got proved me wrong. Like, no, you can give it everything that you have, everything. And you can, including just, blood, sweat, and tears, effort, everything. And it does not guarantee any success at all. And that was hugely disillusioning to me, hugely disillusioning, because I had sort of grown up with this belief, if you work hard enough, you can achieve your dreams. And this was like having the rug pulled from under me and just bam, like, hitting the ground hard. And the other thing was I was exhausted from doing all of this. So I was exhausted physically, emotionally, financially, creatively, spiritually, empty, done. I had nothing left in the tank. And I was devastated, and it was unexpected. It took me by surprise. I didn't expect the results to be that bad. And I also didn't expect to take it so hard. Like if you would have said to me before I like through, let's say, time travel scenarios, if you would have like gone back in time and said, Eric, what are you going to do if this plan doesn't work out? I would have said, then I'll try something else. Like I'm doing this. So I didn't expect it to have that emotional devastation experience. So I kind of, it really, really, really hit me hard. And I reached a point where, this is the short version of the story, believe it or not, but I was on the phone with my mom. I'm in Nashville. She's in Philadelphia, where I grew up. And my mom says to me, why don't you just come home? Right. Very motherly, thing to say.
I think a lot of us have been there.
Why don't you just come home?
Yeah.
And, like up to that point, that would have been a laughable, like, yeah, right. I'm going to go home. Like my parents, as lovely as they are and were, they were not behind my doing this. They did not They were not gung-ho whatsoever about my pursuing this dream. I think they would have much rathered me just do something, I don't know, that was normal, conventional, whatever that, and, only out of goodwill, right? Like they just want to see their kid do okay.
Mm.
Um, and so they were not fans, and they were not supportive of this dream. So I had to do it in spite of that, right? So for my mom to say, "Why don't you come home?" Like, it was a testament to the condition that I was in, that I couldn't think of a better option. I was at a point where I would have had to find a new place to live and some job, and I could have easily done these things if I had been, well. I was not well. I could barely get out of bed. I was deeply, deeply, deeply depressed. So I went home to my childhood home, back to my parents' house, right when I turned 25, and proceeded to have the worst year of my life.
Wow.
Oh man, was it terrible. Really bad. And it was bad for them too. And I'm sorry, mom and dad. I know it must have been hellish for them too. Because, the last thing as a parent you want to see is your kid utterly just, you know, I mean, they couldn't handle seeing me in that condition, and I don't blame them. And I didn't want to bother them. I didn't want to bother anyone, and I didn't want anyone to bother me. All I wanted to do was sleep. That's it. And many, many years later, um, it was pointed out to me that the word depressed can be separated into deep
Deep.
rest.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, that's what I needed. Like
Yeah.
I was so exhausted. I needed deep rest. And I didn't really have an opportunity to get it.
Yeah.
um,
What do
anyway,
you
so
think? I'd love to know, Eric, in relation to that. What is the big takeaway you get from an experience like that? Because I do feel like upon reflection, I mean, being determined to achieve your goals is absolutely amazing. What element do you feel like was missing in that whole experience?
fantastic question. I think that so I was 25 when I kind of really like crashed and burned, and now I'm just about to turn 50, so twice that age.
Yeah.
And in the time that's elapsed since, um, I've had quite a journey. I've had quite a journey. Wouldn't have predicted most of it. And what was I lacking? I think some of it. It's a great question. I don't have a preformed answer, so I'm talking off the cuff. Part of it has to do with this idea that I've recently distilled into 3 words. I think I shared it with you before actually, which is explorations over expectations. This is what I've learned in 50 years on this planet, is that we as human beings, we get to explore. We get to explore our own talents and capacities and interests, and we get to explore the world if we're so privileged and lucky and able to. But there's no guarantee made to any of us about anything other than death and taxes, right? um, so all we get to do is explore things, and we don't really have. I mean, we can do everything we can to make our dreams come true, and we can put all of our efforts in the direction of the things that matter to us. But there's no promise anywhere that anything's going to work out the way we want. And I really believed that it was just a matter of effort. I mean, of course you have to be talented to succeed in an artistic profession, right? But talent is so subjective. And as we know, anyone working in the arts in any capacity can see it's not a meritocracy. There are so many factors that go into one person having a successful career versus another one not, that have nothing to do with the talent or the ability. So And it was also, by the way, I have to say, very disheartening to me to watch other musicians, some that were close friends, some that were I only knew peripherally, but whose talent I believed in deeply. And I thought these people are amazing. Like they're as good as anyone you've heard, and you're gonna agree when you hear them. And you would not, Jennah-louise, have heard of any of these people, and no one really would have heard of any of these people if I were to say their names all these years later. And that broke my heart too.
Mm.
It really did. It was like, but they're so good. They're so good. The world is so unfair. There's no justice to this. Like, why? And then you see these idiots that like put on a cowboy hat and they walk a certain way and like they talk a certain way and like they have a marketing team behind them and like huge career. Not all of them, but and I do think that if you're going to have a lasting career in music or in any other artistic profession, you do have to back it up with some talent at some point if you're going to sustain it, I think. But
and when you're 25, Eric, and you're having like a good year of deep rest, was that mainly due to your realization that sort of in your perspective at the time, life can be unfair? Or at that time in your life, did you make it mean something about yourself?
These are awesome questions. Yeah, well, yes, very astute of you. Yes, I was disappointed in the fact that I felt like what I believed was proven wrong. Like I literally did it until I could no longer do it, and it didn't work. And that really was the opposite of everything I believed growing up. And these are just messages, I guess, that I absorbed from the culture, to some extent, even actually from mom and dad, like they instilled that belief, like, you can do anything, like you can do whatever you want if you put your mind to it. And so I really, truly believed that. So that's number one. So I felt very disillusioned. Okay. But to your point and your very astute question about what did this say about me? Yes. So this was and thank you, this helps me crystallize it. The big mistake that I made, if you want to call it that, is my whole sense of identity and self-worth really was wrapped up in this. This wasn't just about something that I wanted to do. And when rejection is very much part of the process of any artistic pursuit. You have to expect it. And I did. I mean, I wasn't like totally naive to it. I actually wore my rejections with pride as badges of honor. I tried to collect as many of them as I could. But first of all, what's kind of interesting is that there's a couple of things to say here. Number one, the real thing of it, the real crux of it is that my entire sense of self-worth and my entire sense, I felt like it was tied to this identity that I had created for myself. No one created it. I created it. It was like, I am only worthwhile if I'm successful at this particular thing that I want to do.
Right.
I really internalized that to a large and very unhealthy degree. I really believed that I had to succeed. And by the way, to succeed by my own definition or standard was I had to make music that was as good as I was capable of making. So I had to make myself proud of my efforts artistically. And I did with that album. I felt like this is the best album I am capable of making. I was thrilled
Beautiful.
with that. But also, I felt like in order to be a success, the external world had to recognize it at least enough to allow me to support myself doing the music. So I didn't mean necessarily, huge amounts of, wealth and fame, but it meant enough commercial success that I could feed myself and clothe myself and shelter myself through my musical efforts. And I didn't realize the extent to which my own sense of self-worth was tied up in this. I think I did somewhat, but I really felt I felt like just a complete and total failure.
Mm.
And it's really sad, because look at what I did. When I look back, I'm blown. I'm
Right.
impressed with that kid, that young guy.
Yeah.
Like he was amazing. Like I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm totally impressed with the guts that he had, with the heart that he had, with the passion, with the drive, with the determination. Like I salute 25-year-old and younger Eric. Um, but I had to learn that what I had done was really that my whole way of approaching this was really unhealthy. And in fact, I would probably argue that even if I had succeeded initially, I think that this fall was going to be inevitable, because if my entire like sense of well-being was dependent upon things outside of my control, well, then eventually, eventually things are not going to go well the
Yeah.
way, so it probably would have happened no matter what. But it was a unbelievably difficult time. And then of course, things just got worse before they got better, and I went through some relationship breakups at that time, before and after that, that were just, it was like being kicked while you were down by life, like, oh, not painful enough for you. Like, try this. Um,
Yeah.
and just, I mean, phew. And so I had to learn a lot of things, and I know, because I've learned them in the time that's elapsed. There's still plenty more to learning to do, but I know that at 25 I had not learned a lot of really key
Mm.
life lessons, and maybe there was an easier way to learn them, but I had to learn them the hard way.
All at
And
once.
one of those lessons is just that, you have to just learning self-acceptance and self-love,
Mm.
uh, regardless of whatever you achieve or don't achieve in the world, and how, it sounds so basic and obvious, but I really like had to get that. And for me, what I had to do, I think, was I had to completely put music aside, completely, just about. And I had to learn to like myself without that superpower that I had. I had to learn, like, I'm an okay person, and not just that, but it's this is huge, but it's possible for me to be happy and fulfilled. Even I mean, music is a huge part of me and my life, and it'll always be something I love. But I had to learn that I was okay without it, and that I could actually be relatively happy without it. And
Mm.
then once I learned that, once I got there, which took years, then I could reincorporate music into my life, reintroduce it into my life in a much healthier way. And I did. And so, yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for sharing it. Beautiful. I thoroughly enjoyed going through that process of thinking. I think, I largely, as you're aware, enjoy speaking to people that are having new reflections in real time. It's always a
Yeah.
beautiful experience to share. So thank you. I want to know, Eric, because to my understanding, at that point in your life, you really got to a point that you were quite stuck. I mean, as you shared everything that you're sort of living and breathing up until that point, you're beginning to sort of decide to put that to the side, to experiment with this sense of self-love and self-acceptance, and sort of bringing it up into
And none of that was
present.
conscious, by the way. That was not like, now I need to do, like, no.
Yeah.
I had to stumble through that.
Yeah. Let's do something other than lay in bed all day. Let's try this. I have been there also.
Mm.
I want to talk to you about being stuck, because I know sort of bringing us into the present day, as you said, you're basically twice that age now, and you do coaching in line with many of the lessons that you learned then, and I'm sure over the next 25 years. Being stuck is certainly a common experience for people. What have you learned about being able to help ourselves in becoming unstuck?
Beautiful question. I actually created an entire course to answer that question, an online course called Opening to Greater Possibilities. And I didn't the what I was doing, I thought I was writing a book. It ended up becoming this course, but the thought process behind it was I was thinking of 25-year-old, Eric at his lowest and marveling at after surviving that very, very just unbelievably difficult, emotionally challenging, time of my life, dark night of the soul, classic dark night of the soul kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I somehow lived through it. And I thought to myself, my life now is so much different, and I never could have predicted so many of the things that I've ended up doing. And I'm at, I'm still alive and life is still hard and challenging. But I'm a completely different person, from that broken version of me. And so I asked myself, how did I get here from there? How did I get to a place where I'm just much healthier and more and happier and also so much more well-rounded, for lack of a better word. Like I've expanded and explored so many other interests and continue. One of the best things about life, in my opinion, is that you can still get interested in new things all the time,
Yeah.
and you have
Yeah.
no idea where that might take you. Like, that's amazing. Thank God for that.
But as you
Otherwise,
know,
it would have been like
Eric, I
me.
mean, so many of us, we've forgotten that, right? Particularly some of us that get to a certain age. It's like we don't give ourselves the permission to explore new things.
Yeah.
We sort of stay with what we've got. And I love your passion in that, because I think it's important to emphasize that no matter what age you are, there is always a new opportunity, a new moment to start exploring new things.
Yeah. So there's a module in my course that's called "You Don't Know Yourself as Well as You Think You Do."
Mm,
And
I like
I
it.
love it. I love this
Mm.
because it keeps proving true to me. Like, I keep learning this. Like, I thought I was like, yeah, I know this Eric guy. I know everything he likes and doesn't like, and I know him really well by now. And I still manage to surprise myself, or life will surprise me. And I'll be like, yeah, never would have guessed that. Like, being of interest to me, or being something I would entertain or actually do. Like, so my first thought and thing that I would say to anyone who's feeling stuck, first of all, is empathy. I've been there. I get it. It's hard and it's really, frustrating. um, so the course is filled with different tools and techniques to potentially get yourself unstuck. And the way that I created it was, I thought back to myself, and I thought, what were, sometimes we luck into things, good fortune strikes, and we don't control a lot of what goes on in the world. So we're at the mercy of things. But I asked myself this important question when I was working on what I thought was a book and became this course, which was, what were the things that I did? What role did I play in helping myself, in helping get myself unstuck, in helping myself become happier and more curious and exploratory? Like, what role did I play? Because it wasn't just stuff happening to me. I clearly had to say yes to certain things or no to certain things. I had to be open to certain things. And I literally just brainstormed, what were all the things that I did that helped me get unstuck and helped me create a much richer, more fulfilling life. And then I eventually organized it into the course. But um, there were some mindsets, there were some mindset changes, and that was a big one. This idea of humility, that we think we know ourselves, and like, and the reason why that's a problem is because we impose limits that don't have to be there. And we'll close ourselves off to things because we say, I already know I don't like that. Do you? Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't like it now. Maybe like I've had so many experiences like this. I can't even tell you. And so in the course, I try to encourage people to just take very small steps. And I don't like it's up to you to determine what these are. Follow the answers are within you. I don't have the answers for you. You have them, but I can maybe help tease them out by just giving you a supportive space and by asking you some questions and getting yourself to become more curious about yourself and your own potential and your own interests and the world. And so, yeah, it's another long answer, but there definitely are things that we can do when we are stuck, and they're not always. Sometimes they're obvious. Sometimes they're not obvious to us because we can't see it because we're too enmeshed in it.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes just a person on the outside to say, hey, did you know there's a door right behind you can walk through? And
walk around the wall.
So sometimes it's obvious and we can't see it, but other times it's not obvious. Sometimes it's counterintuitive, and you have to just experiment and just, if I had to sum it up in 3 words, it would be try new things.
Yeah.
Try new things.
Right.
What you've been doing isn't working. Try new things. You don't necessarily know which one of those new things is going to lead to an aha moment or something that becomes a lifelong passion or interest, or that introduces you to your soulmate. Like we can't predict these things, but all you can do is honor those impulses that you have. Just honor them and just take a step in a particular direction, and like make it, the stakes aren't high. Like you're just exploring. Again, this is about minimizing the expectations and valuing the explorations. And I found that when I did that when I tried new things without being so attached to them and without my sense of self-worth being attached to them or how I did at them, that's when I started making huge progress. And I have many examples I can give you if you want them.
Well, I love the idea of openness to exploring, because as you said, a lot of people can really come back, and it's my belief, it's just the ego that comes back with this, that, well, I know myself, I know who I am. And it's always the question of like, well, if you knew yourself so well, why do you not know what makes you happy? Why do you not know what makes you fulfilled? There's obviously still space for you to get to know yourself. But as you also shared, this is in line with different mindsets and different perspectives. And I know in relation to happiness, I read on your website, you sort of speak to something along the lines of, we will not experience happiness if we're sort of constantly pursuing it. Can you share more about that mindset?
Yeah, it's really just an observation that when we chase happiness, we never catch it.
Right.
And
yeah, where are you?
What happens
I'm getting there. It's like, where are you getting to? Where is there?
Yeah, what happens is happiness will sneaks up on us. It's not like, there's happiness in the distance and I'm going to make a beeline for it. And it's like that doesn't work in my experience. It doesn't mean you shouldn't go in the direction of things that make you happy. No, I'm not saying that at all. In fact, absolutely do that. Like if you know something makes you happy, incorporate it into your life as much as you can. But I think that happiness is a byproduct. It's not like something we can chase and capture and then, I've got you, happiness. It's more like when we're doing things that make ourselves proud of ourselves, right? When we're doing things where we're growing and we like who we're becoming, we become happy. And it's like, look at that, So, and also it's not realistic to think you're going to be happy all the time. So that's just ridiculous.
I completely agree with that. I've learned that something that partners really well with this is a quote from one of my mentors, Peter Crone. He says that true happiness is in the absence of the search for happiness. And
beautiful. Yeah.
Beautiful. And what I learned from that is that happiness is an experience, a state that we can connect with at any point in our lives because it is within us, that we can always come back to. But as you're sharing, Eric, just because it is there for us to experience doesn't mean it's a constant, but just a reminder that at any point that we are seeking, searching, that it is indeed something that we should be looking within instead of looking on the outside of us to circumstance to fulfill that.
And I have a couple of things to say in response to that. So when you had said earlier that like we get into this state where we like, oh, I know myself and I know what makes me happy. And then you rightly posed the question, well, if you're so smart, Mr. Smarty Pants, about what makes you happy, how come you're not happy? But I imagined someone replying to that and saying, I know what makes me happy, but the world is not cooperating. The world is not giving me the things that make me happy.
The sun isn't where I want the sun to be. The moon isn't where I want the moon to be.
And so like I could have said, my younger self could have said, I know what makes me happy. What makes me happy is playing music on stage for people and making music and da 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 da. And the thing is like, okay, if that's what makes you happy, and it is one thing that makes me happy, that's not the only thing, but it is one thing. Like I can still do that. I don't have to necessarily even be doing it professionally, but I can still, if those things make me happy, no one's stopping me from doing them. I can still do them. And I had to learn that. Like it took me it sounds so obvious. I can't tell you how long it took me to like really get that. And it was so liberating when I did, because then I could do it for its own sake, for the joy of doing it without any expectation of anything coming from it or, anything coming of it, like doing it just because. And that's great. And I think I had another thread I was going to, about happiness, which is just that, is happiness really the ultimate goal? I mean, everybody wants to be happy. But I think that first of all, it's not always in our control. I mean, you said it comes from within. I do think so. I don't know if it's something we can sum it up on a moment's notice. Some people might be better at that than I'm not there. I'm not a Zen master. Maybe there are people that can get there, that can go, they can get their mind in such a state, like regardless of what's going on, that they can be happy. God bless them if they can do that.
I think it would be through the filter of gratitude. That's what sort of my experience has been. That's the easy access. That's
beautiful.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I found that I have found that gratitude is not a function of our circumstances. It's a function of our perspective.
Beautiful.
But sometimes it's more accessible.
Yes.
More
by
easily
virtue of being human, we will have our days that we're more in touch.
For sure, gratitude is huge, and that is probably the best shortcut, if you will, to happiness. But I also think that that rather than focus on happiness. I mean, happiness is great, but focusing on meaning,
beautiful,
I think, is really the thing.
Yeah.
If we just want the world to make us happy and everything to make us happy, and for us to be
we're just
happy,
pleasure seekers.
I mean, I'm not discounting happiness. It's great, but it's if our lives were nothing but if filled with nothing but happiness, I think they would be meaningless. I think they would be actually meaningless, because happiness wouldn't mean anything. We didn't have to do anything to earn it, or we didn't have to grow to, we didn't have to, so finding what's meaningful to you is going to give you, it might not be like smiley happiness all the time. Sometimes it will, but it's going to give you a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that's probably more powerful and lasting than a happy state.
Right. I feel like the word happiness as well, for a lot of us, it's just kind of a go-to word. But if we were to sort of question what that actually means, a lot of us wouldn't have an easy answer. And I think that's sort of why it's obviously amazing working with coaches and people like that as well, because it kind of gets you to start exploring these words and these expectations that we generally put on ourselves. And we realize, okay, maybe happiness isn't what I'm actually seeking, as you're suggesting. Maybe it's meaning. For me, it's connection.
Yeah.
and sort of begin to explore what's more true to us. But I do feel like, I know a big part of your work is in line with fulfillment, which to my understanding is different to happiness as well. We kind of get really specific and nuanced in this. But we've sort of spoken about becoming unstuck, what happiness is. If we sort of start moving in that direction, I do feel like fulfillment kind of is on that process. How do you recommend that we bring a deeper sense of fulfillment into our lives?
Well, the first thing you have to do, and I think you have to figure this out. Like, there's not necessarily a shortcut to getting there, but you have to have experiences. You have to have experiences of fulfillment. Okay. So, accidentally or otherwise, you have to have that experience to know what it is. And it can come from an infinite number of possible things. If you're learning a musical instrument, the fulfillment of learning a piece of music or a song that you couldn't play, but you worked at it and you worked at it and you finally got to a point of proficiency and now you can play it. That's really satisfying. Are you going to be like ecstatic when that happens? Probably not, actually, because it's such a slow going process that you don't even really notice your progress as you're making it. But then you do recognize, hey, now I can play this and I can, and there's something that's satisfying because you used some of the best parts of yourself to make something happen that is meaningful to you. So to go after fulfillment, it helps if you have a point of reference of what that experience is. And the more points of reference you have, the better, because then you can make better educated guesses as to what might create more fulfillment.
Beautiful.
But it's a journey, and it's an ongoing journey. And life really can be confusing, because just when you think you understand it, or understand yourself, or what you find satisfying or fulfilling or makes you happy, like maybe at some point it doesn't anymore. Then what do you do? Like, that you counted on that. That was the thing that you got all of you. And this happens to empty nesters as just one example, right? Like, what the thing that's fulfilling for them is parenthood and the experience of hands-on parenting. And then the kids leave the house and they're lost. Like, that was what gave my life meaning and made me feel fulfilled. And now they're out of the house. And now how do I get that sense of fulfillment? Well, they might come back. They might come back if their music career doesn't pan out. But so the point is that nothing in life is static. Everything's constantly changing. We're constantly changing. The world around us is constantly changing. And so even when you think, I got it, like, then suddenly everything's changing. So, and then you have to get more, then it's time to then be more in that sort of open and maybe reflective and experimental and exploratory state of mind where you're looking for the next thing. The more varied, I wrote this is connected to this, and it maybe is closer to the happiness piece than the fulfillment piece, but they are related for sure. I wrote a blog post years ago called "Prescription for a Bad Mood." And in this blog post, I talk about the reality of bad moods, that no one is immune to them. They are a part of the human experience. We're all going to have a bad mood at some point. And the question is, what do we do with that, right? And I suggest in that blog post, creating for yourself, however long it takes you to do this, a menu of go-to things to help change your state of mind, or to help, it's not like we're ever going to solve the problem of bad moods once and for all. But the more things you've figured out that are ways that can potentially change your frame of mind or improve your state of mind, the better. And one of these is exercise. It's an obvious one, I think. But for me, hiking is like a go-to thing in my life that is just, always makes me feel better and is just nourishing on every level. So I make a point of, and I don't have to make myself do it. It's such a no brainer to me. It's like, I want to go out and hike, but, maybe the weather is not always, I live in LA. So, but, maybe the weather isn't going to be hospitable to hiking for everyone all the time. So then you have to have something else. What's your backup? What's your indoor version of exercise that can be a go-to that can help you, work your way into a better frame of mind so exercise is just one category. And I suggest having a menu of things that from experience or that you learn from experience help you to feel better about yourself. Another sort of obvious one for you, I'm sure you'll be familiar with this one, is just if you feel crappy, go help somebody else.
Right.
Like do something for somebody else. You'd be
get outside of yourself. Yeah.
Amazed. Right. And once you lock that, once you get that, you're like, oh, another thing I can put on my menu now, And so I think, and the reason I call it a menu, and the reason I think of it this way and suggest creating a menu of these things in advance, is because when you're in a bad mood, you're not in a place to think of these things. You want these things handed to you on a menu, like, here, this is from yourself, you idiot. Not you idiot, but this is from yourself, bad mood person. Look and see, reap the benefits of the wisdom of your own self, and try doing some of these things, and maybe you can improve your mood, and maybe you can improve your whole day as a result. So yeah, I think happiness and fulfillment are for sure connected, but they're not identical. And I love teasing out those nuances, by the way. So
certainly a lesson that I've learned is that everybody seems to have different definitions. So it's always interesting to see sort of what aspect we come from. As we sort of come to a close, Eric, I would love to know, at the moment, what is sort of a more recent lesson that you have learned that you're still sort of integrating?
Well, it's still a challenge for me to this notion of explorations over expectations. It's so interesting because oftentimes we don't even realize we have expectations until we feel bad. Like we feel disappointed about we feel disappointed about something.
Yeah.
And that is a signal like, why you feel disappointed? Because you had an expectation about something going a certain way and it didn't. And now you're disappointed. And so I don't know that it's ever possible to completely eliminate all expectations. I don't think that's realistic. And I don't know if it's even possible or even desirable. I mean, it's a part of it's a part of being human, I think. But the more you can become aware of them, the more likely, I think the more you're aware of the expectations that you have, the less likely that they're going to take you by surprise and really wreak havoc in your life.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm still very actively learning and working on. I just recognized it. And so that doesn't mean I've mastered it, but it's something that I have become aware of and do my best to try to manage my expectations for things, and to try to prioritize curiosity instead, and exploration, because sometimes things work out better. Like sometimes we don't know a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, and we think we know.
Yeah.
We think we know this is what has to happen in order for things to be good today. And the thing is like, as soon as those things are no longer like they go out the window, it's like they're not going to happen. You could sulk about it, or you could say, interesting. I was wrong. I wonder maybe there's something actually that's way better than what I came up with. And to get curious, like what might be great about what just happened? Like what opportunity is there that might be way better than the thing that I thought was going to be so great? This kind of stuff. But it takes a lot of practice. And the other thing, Jennah-louise, you asked like what's still active for me now, working on. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but patience. I mentioned patience earlier. And it's funny because being impatient, and I think this is true of a lot of traits, they're not all good and bad. They're both. And so sometimes being impatient is actually helpful because it puts you into action. You're not going to just sit around and wait, right? Like sometimes impatience can drive you in a positive direction. That said, there is a lot to be said for patience and cultivating patience. And for me, that is still an area that I could develop a lot.
Yeah, one of my mentors, Ben Crow, he works with a lot of world-class athletes, and this element of expectations I was sort of reflecting on, because I'm like, obviously we need goals to work towards, but he has this really lovely frame that, of course, we can set these goals to an extent. I would say they're expectations, but the focus is on the person that we are, on the journey and the process in the systems of achieving that goal. It's not necessarily the achievement of the goal, but the person that we're becoming.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
And it was a beautiful frame to kind of bring that back into the day, and I think help with that element of impatience, because you're not constantly looking forwards into the distance, that this element of this goal is in your everyday life and the person that you show up to be.
Yeah, for athletes, I imagine it's especially challenging because if you're competitive and you want to win something, like, it's hard to look at an incredible achievement that's not winning, but still an incredible achievement. Like really all you can do is like leave everything out there, right? Like give something your all as an athlete, or even just a human being, right? Like that's all that you can do. And other stuff you don't control, and you don't like, all you can do is give something your best, and be happy with the knowledge that you did, because it's not fair to expect anything more of yourself, because by definition, if you gave it your best, that was your best, whether you won the race or you came in 12th. I mean, like if it was your best, it's like, hey, that's all any of us can ever do.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. It's always such a joy to connect and have a chat with you. Thank you for your time. And on a final note, Eric, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
Well, Jennah-louise, because I'm a fan of your show, I knew this question was coming. So I thought about it.
Okay.
And this is not a complete answer, but it's the answer I'll give you, my answer for today.
Beautiful.
So when I think about what it means to be human, the first thing that comes to my mind is what differentiates us from other animals as humans. And there are a couple key things. There's more than a couple, but the couple that I'm concentrating on are, number one, unlike other animals, as far as we know, we have drives and instincts like any other living animal, creature on Earth, right? But we have this capacity that we're not completely beholden to them 24/7. So we might have an instinct to do something. Maybe we're angry and we're going to yell, or we're going to hit someone, or do something bad, right? Now that we still feel that, but as humans, we have the capacity, and sometimes it's more accessible to us than others, but we have the capacity to stop a reaction. And we can pause, and we can reflect, and we can decide how we want to respond. So we can be conscious and thoughtful and intentional about our behavior. And we don't have to be beholden to our gut reactions or our instincts, or, that is one key thing that distinguishes us from other creatures. There's another thing that I think is worth mentioning, which is that as human beings, as opposed to other animals, we have the opportunity, we get to explore both ourselves and the outside world in a way that other animals don't. And what I mean by that is, as humans, we can reflect on our experiences and learn new things about ourselves, which was a huge part of this conversation, and get to know ourselves on, deeper and deeper levels over time, and how complex we are and how much there is to inside of us. And the same for the world. We can direct what parts of the world, outside world, we want to explore, and what things are we curious about in the world. So I think it's these two pieces that essentially I could sum up in two words. As humans, to be human means we get to be conscious explorers of our lives.